Today we're going to talk about a process, what is a process, and introduce the process view of an organization. In the simplest form, a process is the transformation of input into output, and can simply be depicted as this is input, this is the transformation process, and you have output. So if you look at the concept of a process, then everything we do, every job that we're involved, consists of a process. No one operates outside the process. No matter how complex or how simple the activity and the job and the work is, we're all involved in a process. One of the most important features of a process is the feedback loop. So every process has a feedback loop. The purpose of a feedback loop is to feed back information to the process so the appropriate adjustments can be made. We're all familiar in one way or another with the feedback process. The thermostat in your home is an example of a feedback loop. The cruise control in your automobile is an example of a feedback loop. If you take the thermostat as an example, what does a thermostat do? A thermostat continuously scans the environment, collects data, which is the temperature of the room, and sends a signal, continuously sends signals to the compressor, and depending on whether the temperature needs to be increased or reduced, the compressor reacts to that. So it is a continuous process. Therefore, a feedback loop has certain features. One of the features is that it's a continuous process. It's a continuous process. It continuously scans the environment. The second one is based on data. It's database based. You collect data and continuously feed back to the process. The third feature of that is the feedback loop. The information that is fed back to the process leads to either an improvement of maintaining the status quo or improving the environment. So it leads to perhaps an improvement. So it's continuous, it's data-based, and it has to lead to a change or an improvement to the environment of the process. So the feedback loop is very important. Without a feedback loop, we really don't have a process. And the notion of a feedback is essentially a system notion. And if we look at the process viewed as a system, then the feedback loop has to be an important component of that. So if we translate that into the activities we have in the workplace, looking at our processes, then we can see that the feedback loop is an essential part of the improvement process. Now we continuously feed back data to the process, and which may lead to a better status or state of the process. So this is a very simple description of a process, and the idea that we all are involved in a process. Oftentimes the processes are connected and appear as a sequence. So we have a sequential process where a number of processes are connected to each other. We will have greater discussion about sequential processes at later lectures. Then again, each process must show the feedback loop and the feedback process. Just one important feature and couple of important concepts relating to a sequential process, which we will discuss later, as I mentioned, and we will cover in detail when we discuss the topics in the goal, the textbook we are reading, is that These sequential processes exhibit two important characteristics. The first characteristics there is that there are dependencies among the different stages of the process. This process depends on that, this process depends on that, this process depends on that, and this process depends on that. Therefore, we have dependency. These processes are dependent on each other. The second characteristic of a process is, of sequential processes, it is subject to variability. Or statistical fluctuations. That is subject for different measures. So if this is one cycle here, then the next cycles, the values and the measurements may be different. You can think of this, for example, do the number of customers to a restaurant are consistently the same every time, every hour? No, they're not. They're subject to fluctuations. Number of orders per day, number of shipments per day. So these processes are subject to variability. These two features are very important. And when we discuss the sequential lines and the notion of a bottleneck and carry out an experiment in the class, which is the match experiment in the goal, the purpose of that experiment is to show these two characteristics of the process. As I mentioned, we'll have greater discussion relating to that. When we show the process in a picture, in a pictorial representation, here we're only simply showing the activities, and we'll shortly see there are other characteristics that we can show. It is very helpful to really describe the process visually. For example, we often refer to, for example, a bar chart or a Pareto chart is a visual description of your data. This is a picture of your data. It would be helpful and to understand the process if we can describe that process visually, and that's generally referred to as a process map. Process map is a visual description or a pictorial description of a process. So, in a general way, and simply, this is a description of the process. And this is really where we this notion of the process is where we build on as we progress in our class, in operations management. So the unit that we continually take into account, and the notion that we take into account, is the notion of a process and the process view of the organization. Now that we have a simple description of that, of course, this is a very simple description. Let's look at that in a more detail and look at some of the elements of a process.